When we come to verses 51 and 52 here, it seems to me it sheds a new light on these parables. Now back in verses 11 to 13, it spoke of the parables as being used for the multitudes. And in Mark, it especially says he only used parables for the multitudes and then expounded it to his disciples. But verse 51 makes it clear that these parables were also to benefit the disciples. They, in other words, it would illustrate and communicate something to them, and it would prevent somebody from understanding that didn't have the heart to understand it, who didn't have the same kind of interest that they did. Have you understood all these things? They say unto him, yea. So, and he asked that after giving all these parables. So it was intended to be a kind of a judgment against people of bad or superficial heart, but it was to teach and to communicate the truth to these who were of good heart. So then in verse 52, he makes a statement about the resources of people who are going to be teachers of the kingdom. He said unto them, therefore every scribe who hath been made a disciple to the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, who bringeth forth out of his treasure things new and old. A scribe, that was the word for the lawyers, the experts in the law. And I think here more or less just a teacher of the law. There's another place where it's used in this way in chapter 23 and 34 in the first teachers that he would send out. Now, so these are teachers that have also become disciples to the kingdom. Most of those scribes that we read about in the Gospels were people that rejected the kingdom. But these, he speaks of people like the apostles themselves that would be scribes who had been made disciples to the kingdom. Well, he said, that's like a man that's got this household and this treasury, this storeroom, and he got all these supplies, and he brings out of it things old and things new. A teacher that will have all these resources to bring out of his household, things new and things old. I think the difference he's making is the new things that come with him, the age of fulfillment. In John 16:12, toward the end, he told them, I have many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. But when the Holy Spirit's come, he'll guide you into all the truth. So there's new revelation and all that comes with the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy. But it's not all new. And so they bring out of their treasury things old as well as things new. And things that are as old as the law of Moses, but things that remain true and are yet to be taught, and even that are the background for understanding the new things. So just a little word of instruction about teachers, the great resources that they'll be given, that they will have as they do their teaching. And then this section ends. I really believe the last paragraph belongs more with the next chapter. Verse 53 just about marks a good conclusion to all this about the parables. It says, and it came to pass when Jesus had finished these parables, he departed thence. When he had finished these parables. That's just a standard formula. You've got something like that in chapter 7, verse 28, after the Sermon on the Mount. And then after the teaching that Jesus did in chapter 10, in chapter 11, verse 1, you've got this kind of a statement. And in chapter 19, verse 1 again, after some teaching. And in 26:1, after 2 chapters of teaching. So it's almost like Roman numerals or an asterisk or something that marks the end of a section in Matthew. And that being the case, I would think that whoever divided the book into chapters, would have done a better job if they had started chapter 14 with verse 54. And this next section then would continue to put this emphasis on misunderstanding. You got Jesus going to his hometown, being misunderstood and rejected. And then chapter 14, about the death of John the Baptist, the misunderstanding on the part of Herod Antipas. So there continues to be emphasis on the misunderstanding, the unbelief, even as Jesus continues with mighty words and mighty works. And we find that in chapter 14 mostly away from the adversaries. Okay, chapter 13 ends with Jesus going to his own country. Coming into his own country, he taught them in their synagogue. That would be Nazareth, in the area of Nazareth. He taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished and said, "Whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Where does this come from?" They want to know. These mighty works, it's clear what that is. That's the miracles. Where's that come from? And this wisdom, well, that would seem to refer to the things he says, the teaching. He made himself known in 2 ways, with words and with works. And it seems to me one of the important things to notice here is that they're finally going to reject him, but they've already made a great admission here. They admit the wisdom with which he speaks, and they admit the mighty works. This is sort of like when the Pharisees said he did these things by the power of Beelzebub. They were admitting that he did them. And they couldn't question that, so they had to try to undermine and discredit him by undermining how he did it, the power by which he did it. So here there's an admission. The wisdom with which he spake, the mighty works, and they want to know, where does it come from? Well, isn't this the one we know? Verse 55, is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren, James and Joseph and Simon and Judas and his sisters? Are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? They were offended in him. They stumbled and like fell into a trap. Because they knew him. He just grew up among us here. He's just like we are. Where did he get all this? Well, it seems to me there's a great lesson there on the irrationality of unbelief. They say, we can't explain this. How did this one that grew up among us, where did he get all this? They can't explain that. And so their conclusion is they disbelieve. So what kind of a reason is that for disbelief? They admit what he's done. They admit that he spoke with wisdom. They admit that he did the mighty works. So after admitting it, still they're going to be offended. Because he grew up here just like we did. Just irrational. No good reason involved in it. And they really condemn themselves. Well, Jesus makes a comment that's just more or less a common proverb. He said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. he can go anywhere and be honored, or may be honored, but so often it's not the case that he would be that he would be honored in his own country, in his own house. And verse 58 then gives the consequence. He did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. I believe it's Mark's account that says he could not do many mighty works there. Although it does say he did a few miracles. And in fact, these people knew about his mighty works. Verse 54 shows that he did some mighty works that they knew about. So it may be that the point here at verse 58 when he says he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief, not that it was physically impossible for him, but he didn't have people coming to him and asking for help. I'm noted down some of these places back in chapter 4 verses 23 to 25 as the reputation gets around. People are coming to him, bringing their sick. Chapter 14 at the end of the chapter, verses 34 to 36, he comes into the garden spot of Gennesaret, and people hear about him being there, and they bring the sick and he heals them. Well, not Nazareth. People not bringing their sick to him. He does not do many miracles there, and because of their unbelief. And it is not that he couldn't have, but unbelief was keeping them from coming. And I think maybe the good question for us to raise here is, how many times do we fail to get blessings because we have limited him in the same way, just because we don't come, and so we don't get the benefits of his blessings no more than they did. Okay, 3 things mainly to look at in chapter 14. First, the death of John the Baptist. This has already happened at this point. It's kind of a flashback. It already happened. But it's put in here to explain why Herod reacted the way he did when he heard about the miracles of Jesus. At that season, Herod the Tetrarch heard the report concerning Jesus and said unto his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's risen from the dead, and therefore do these powers work in him." So, in Mark's account, it connects this with the sending out of the 12. They went out and did their work, and evidently there's more and more publicity, more and more teaching going on in Galilee, and Herod hears about it and the miracles that are being performed, and it's all connected with Jesus, and he says, "Now this is John the Baptist. He's risen from the dead, and therefore do these powers work in him." Well, then there's an account given about how John came to be put to death, and it's put in here to explain this, why Herod reacted in this way. This is a man with a guilty conscience. Conscience is bothering him, and all the way through this, you've got this dividedness in the mind of Herod. First, verses 3 to 5 shows how John the Baptist had come to be a problem for King Herod. Herod had laid hold on John, bound him, put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John said unto him, "It is not lawful for thee to have her." And when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude because they counted him as a prophet. He would like to have killed him, just got rid of him. But he couldn't do that because the people thought John was a prophet. So he put him under arrest instead. Josephus tells about this stuff. This is Herod Antipas, and he goes to visit this brother named Philip, and makes the acquaintance of this man's wife, and the whole thing ends with him seducing her, and she becomes his wife. It is not lawful, John. John stood up against this. I should have gotten the passages, but the law specifically would forbid marriages between kin in this way. It was an incestuous relationship. He stood against it. So, there was the problem that Herod had with John, and ended up with him putting him in prison. Now then, there's more trouble, verses 6 to 8. Takes this foolish oath. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced in the midst and pleased Herod. Whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she should ask. And she, being put forward by her mother, saith, Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist. So he makes this oath before he knows what she's going to ask. And this drunken banquet, woman comes in there and dances before all these men, and must have been the sort of dance that would fire the passions of men. And under the heat of that, he swears that he'll give her whatever she asks. And her mother has put her up to asking. Now, not put John to death. She knows Herod will worm his way out of this any way he can. But bring me the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Like this is going to be her meal to eat. Something of that nature. Bring it on a platter. So now Herod's caught on the horns of a dilemma. On the one hand, he was grieved for all the reason that he wouldn't put him to death before. But for the sake of his oaths, and of them that sat at meat with him, he commanded it to be given, and he sent and beheaded John in the prison. Don't you get the impression that even the oaths wouldn't have been anything if it was not that so many people heard him? Because of the oaths, and also for the sake of them that sat at meat with him. He was on record before too many people, and so under those circumstances. This is not a man who acts out of conviction, out of finding out what's right and doing the right thing, but he wavers from one thing to another, and under these kind of pressures does the wrong thing. He knows what's right, and he does the wrong thing. So it's no wonder that he hears about these things from being done by Jesus, and his under the tortures of a conscience that was guilty. Say this must be John the Baptist risen from the dead, and that explains these powers. Well, verse 11, his head was brought on a platter and given to the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took up the corpse and buried him, and they went and told Jesus. So this had already happened, and it's put in here to explain this reaction of Herod. Later on in Matthew 16, 13, 14, Jesus solicits this confession from Peter. He first asked them, "Who do men say that I am?" And one of the answers was, they say you're John the Baptist. That must go back to Herod. He said he's John the Baptist, risen from the dead. And so this was an example of these misunderstandings that people had of Jesus. First, there at his hometown, and now Herod. So there just continues to be an emphasis on this as we move on through this history of the Galilean ministry. Now next, there's a withdrawal that takes place, kind of a retirement from these populous centers that takes place in verse 13, and it's in this period that Jesus feeds this great multitude from with the loaves and the fishes. Verse 13 speaks of the withdrawal. Now when Jesus heard it, he withdrew from thence in a boat to a desert place apart. And when the multitudes heard thereof, they followed him on foot from the cities. So this is connected then with Herod, what Herod has done with John the Baptist, and a withdrawal under those circumstances. Jesus he avoids confrontation. He will let himself be put to death, but not till he's ready. But there's another thing that happens here. It's not mentioned in Matthew. In Mark chapter 6 verses 30 to 32, and in Luke chapter 9 verse 10, it points out that the apostles who had been sent out on that mission to go preach the kingdom among the Jews, that they just returned and made their report to Jesus. And so a part of the motive then in this retirement is so they can have a period of rest. And that's specially brought out in Mark 6. Jesus didn't work just all the time and didn't expect his disciples just to work all the time, but he understood the need for rest. But apparently he doesn't get much rest, so they withdraw. But the crowds follow. And in verse 14, he came forth and saw a great multitude, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So there was no escape from activity for very long. His compassion would not allow it. Well, they're out there till evening, verse 15 says. And so he makes this proposal to the disciples. First they bring something up to him, and then he makes a proposal. And when even was come, the disciples came to him saying, the place is desert, the time is already past. Send the multitudes away that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food. You don't have 7-Elevens out here. You can't need to go get themselves to eat. And then this proposal that Jesus makes. But Jesus said unto them, they have no need to go away. Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. John's account in chapter 6 mentions that came from a boy who brought his lunch. The 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. How are we going to feed this crowd? I think in John they say, what's that among so many? But you feed them, he said. And that may be the great lesson that stands out in this particular miracle. They're going to learn something. They're going to learn that they've got resources that they didn't know they had. And so it's mentioned in these next verses in both Matthew and in Mark and in Luke, although not in John. There's a different emphasis in John. But it's mentioned in these first 3 Gospels that the disciples are the ones who are Jesus' instruments in feeding this crowd. They say unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he said, bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. And looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to the disciples and the disciples to the multitude. So he told them to feed this crowd. And they become the ones that feed the crowd here. I was reading the commentary of Ritterbos on this, and he thinks that when Jesus tells them, you feed them, you give them something to eat, you do it. suggesting that they've got resources they don't know they have. They're going to learn something out of this, and that maybe this is a lesson and a part of the training of the apostles. There's a much longer development of this in the Gospel of John than there is here. It tells about after they cross the water that Jesus comes to Capernaum. He goes into the synagogue, and this crowd has followed him over there to Capernaum. And he begins to teach them the lesson about the bread of life. A bread that he has to give that you can eat and live forever. And then for long he's saying, I am the bread of life. And he says that, I think, about 3 different times in John chapter 6. I am the bread of life. So he is the one. He proved when he took those 5 loaves and 2 fish and he was able to feed this crowd with it, he showed that he had the ability to supply the thing that sustains people's life. And so when he says, I am the bread of life, that he's already proved his point. He's given good reason for believing that he is able to give a bread that would enable people to live forever. But he's going to send these apostles out to distribute this bread as they preach the gospel. And it may be that the main point of this may be the effect that this is going to have on them, the thing they'll be able to remember, the sufficiency that there was. Just this inexhaustible supply of bread, even though it looked like so little. But it was enough. And so they will go forth doing their work with all these miracles in their background and knowing the sufficiency that they have as they feed the world on the bread of life. Then the only thing left here is all this detail showing the greatness of the miracle. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. One of them was wondering what's that going to be among so many? It's nearly nothing. But verse 20 says, number 1, they all ate, and number 2, they were filled. It was not just a matter that everybody got a little nibble, but they had all they wanted. And apparently some people took more than they needed. And so number 3, they took up that which remained over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. So they ended up with more than they had to start with. And then the 4th point, and it seems that all this detail is added, just piled up here, show the greatness of this miracle. And the last point is, and they that did eat were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. At least 5,000 were fed there. According to John, the crowd got all excited about this. They said, this is of a truth the prophet that Moses was talking about when he said God would raise up a prophet like me. This is a prophet coming to the world. They want to take him by force and make him king. The modernist scholars, they want to explain this as in some kind of a naturalistic way. You ever read The Robe, Lloyd Douglas? He's got this story in there. It says this little boy, he broke open his lunch and said actually other people had brought their lunches too, but nobody had enough to feed everybody. But the little boy, he took his out, started eating and shared with others. And other people began to do the same thing. And before long, from the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, everybody had been fed. No miracle to it, all just naturalistic. But the thing about this, he doesn't explain what excited the people so much. There's no naturalistic explanation that explains why people would think that this is the Messiah and we need to take him and make him king right now. It was a miracle that was performed here. And the crowd reaction is the thing that shows this. I think out of all the miracles, I would have really loved to have had a close-up view of this one. Breaking this bread, this giving it to various ones, and you just keep on giving it and giving it and giving it. I'd have loved to have had a close-up view. All right. Then the walking on water. Now that takes place. This takes place when, as the disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee, go back to the west side. There's some very strong language that's used in verse 22 to describe Jesus sending these disciples away. And straightway, immediately, he constrained the disciples to enter into the boat. That's strong language. He made them do that. And to go before him unto the other side till he should send the multitudes away. And after he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into the mountain apart to pray. And when even was come, he was there alone. So he gets them separated from the crowd, and he separates from the crowd himself. The thing that explains this is not in Matthew, it's in John chapter 6, verse 14 and 15. That crowd reaction. When they first acknowledged him as the prophet that has come into the world, and then they were about to take him by force and make him king. I think that explains this constraining the apostles. Immediately, get in the boat, go. He wants to get them separated from that kind of influence. And after all, they've been dull enough in their understanding of the nature of the kingdom, and he's going to have to do a whole lot more teaching to get them to understand the way his kingdom really is. And he does not want them under the influence of a crowd that's got that kind of ideas about what kind of king he wants to be. So he gets them in the boat, and he sends them on and then goes up into the mountain to pray. I believe that may be suggestive of an important lesson. This would be another one of those times where it was almost like the temptation of Satan, where he said, just bow down and do homage to me, and I'll give you the rule over all the world. Here it is again. He gets his disciples away from that, and he himself goes up into the mountain to pray. So this is how he keeps his thinking straight. This communion with God, getting his focus on God and God's will, and not being distracted by these things that would draw him away to another idea of the kingdom. So, there they are, on the way in the boat, and he comes to them. Verse 23, and after he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into the mountain apart to pray, and when even was come, he was there alone. But the boat was now in the midst of the sea, distressed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night he came unto them, walking upon the sea. The Romans divided the watch into the night into 4 watches. And usually it's explained that the fourth watch would be about from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. Deepest darkness. He comes to them walking upon the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. After all, what else could it be? See somebody out there in the dark walking on the water. It's got to be a ghost. And straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid." Nothing to be afraid of is him. Well, he walks on the sea. Then Peter wants to walk on the sea. Verses 28 to 31. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee upon the waters. So he's not willing to just take it for granted that he can do this and just strike out. He has to ask permission. But he does have this faith that he could do it if the Lord bids him come to him. And he said, come. And Peter went down from the boat and walked upon the waters to come to Jesus. But then he evidently got to looking around. When he saw the wind, he was afraid. You know, it's not just they're walking on the water. This is like a storm. The wind's contrary. He saw the wind, the effect of it. He was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, took hold of him, and saith unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And so he was doing it. He was walking on the sea. He kept his eyes on Jesus. His faith was fixed on the Lord and his power. But when he saw the wind, boy, that's a parable in itself. We do pretty well when we keep our eyes on the Lord. But it's when we look around, we see all these negative things. We see the wind, the waves of doubt and disbelief, and we're distracted and we lose our vision and we begin to sink. Doesn't call this a parable, it's a miracle of happening, but it's sure a lesson that's easy to draw out of this. Keeping our eyes on the Lord. Verse 32, when they were gone up into the boat, the wind ceased. So there's another miracle. Evidently that's the way that's to be understood. The wind ceases, and judging from their reaction, they must have taken it in that way. Verse 33, and they that were in the boat worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. That's a little bit of progress, isn't it? You remember what they were, when he stilled the storm before, what they were saying? Let's see if I can find that chapter. Well, I forgot I was missing the first pages of that New Testament. It's in Matthew 8, I think it is. In chapter 8, 27, he was asleep in the boat, and he got up and he rebuked the wind. It quit. And verse 27 says, the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the seas obey him? What kind of man is this? Well, they've made some progress now. They worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. So it may be, these are miracles that were not for the crowds. They were for his disciples. They would deepen and strengthen their faith. He's going to send them out into the world to preach the gospel. And the memory of this would surely teach them some important things as they went out to face difficult things in the world. They would learn here the power that Jesus has over the forces of nature. And they would learn also that they were safe when they were in his presence. If it's him, there's no cause to be afraid. And so, all of these things that they saw and that they heard, it's not all to bring people to faith in the first place. It strengthens and deepens the faith of the disciples and becomes an important part of their preparation for the task that they're going to have before them. The chapter ends by marking an end to this period of retirement or the withdrawal Jesus comes to Gennesaret, does some work there, and this is summarized in 34 to 36. And when they crossed over, they came to the land unto Gennesaret. Now, what's not mentioned here that is mentioned in John chapter 6 is that he came first to Capernaum. Gennesaret must have been right close to Capernaum, but he came to the synagogue and was doing this teaching based on the miracle of the bread and the fishes, and claimed, "I am the bread of life." And now there's a summary of what goes on out of that, people coming to him over the miracles. Gennesaret was a very fertile plain. Josephus has got a description of this. I didn't have time to go into it, but heavily populated, fertile plain on the west side of the Sea of Galilee and close to Capernaum, which was Jesus' headquarters there. And so when he came there, when the men of that place knew him, they sent into all that region round about and brought unto him all that were sick, and they besought him that they might only touch the border of his garment, and as many as touched were made whole. So he had withdrawn to a desert place. People followed him. He did the miracle. Now he crosses over, and again he gives himself fully to the people, and there's this excitement. It's easy to make too much of this. The excitement as people come. They're coming over the miracles, but this is a people without understanding, and this is another thing that's brought out in John. When he does the teaching about the bread of life, I am the bread of life, and before he's through with that, he talks about giving his life, his flesh, his blood. You'll have to eat my flesh, drink my blood. That was the time that the people say, "What's this all about? This is a hard saying. Who can accept it?" They all leave. They followed him. They were excited. They were going to take him by force and make him king. But he does this teaching, and they find out, and especially about his death, be the thing that they would stumble over. And when they find out what it's really all about, then they give it up. And so many of them leave that he turns to the 12 and he says, "Well, will you also go away?" And that's where Peter says, "Well, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." So I think that understanding has to be made here, or that explanation, that this is a superficial thing. They're excited over miracles, but they do not have that depth of understanding about his messiahship, his kingdom, his real mission, what he's really all about. This is a thing that just keeps being repeated through this section till he ends this Galilean ministry. He keeps training the apostles, showing them things, teaching them things. And the crowds have this enthusiasm over miracles. But really, finally, they're going to show themselves to be what he calls them, an evil and adulterous generation, not faithful to God.